Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Dino, and it is a chilly 3 degrees Celsius, around 38 degrees Fahrenheit here in Niagara Falls, Ontario. It's November 2nd, and fall is definitely in the air, and winter is just around the corner. But that doesn't mean that my DR650 riding season is ending, and definitely doesn't mean that the modifications don't end. I tend to work on my motorcycle more in the cold weather than I do in the warm weather. Today, I want to take a look at something that many DR riders choose to do, and that is modify their final gear drive on their motorcycle. I'm going to do that today to sort of make the bike ride a little better for the type of riding I've been doing lately. And I want to bring you along and show you how I'm going to change out the front sprocket on my DR650. So why don't you sit back, grab yourself something warm to drink, please, today, and enjoy Dino's Tinker Shed. I got a little bit more work to do before I can get to the fun stuff, so I'll see you in a minute in the shed, where it's warm. Hey, for anybody that actually wonders, this tool shed is a real tool shed. It houses all my wife and I's gardening tools as well as all of my power sports stuff. It's the key to a good marriage or any relationship is to know when to share things and cooperate together. My wife and I have done that effectively for 30 years now. But I'm sure there's not too many people out there that want to know about my marriage or relationships in general. You're here for some DR650 content, and I want to deliver that to you. So today is going to be part one of a couple videos that I want to make. I want to talk about why I want to re-gear my motorcycle and why many people want to re-gear their motorcycle. And then I'm going to show you how to change the front sprocket from a 14 tooth that I currently have to the stock 15 tooth, and sort of the process in order to do that. Now, I guess the first place to start would be why somebody, myself included, would want to actually change the gearing on their motorcycle. So why don't we go take a look at the motorcycle and I'll talk about it there. Oh, it's getting harder to get down on the ground like this, I tell you. So the DR650, like the vast majority of dual sport motorcycles, uses a chain and sprocket style final drive as opposed to other options that are out there. When power leaves the transmission, it uses the output shaft to attach to a sprocket in the front and a sprocket in the rear, which is joined by a chain, in this case an O-ring style chain. There are a couple other options out there. Some more adventure bike leaning options might use a shaft drive or possibly a belt drive. But the chain drive tends to be favored for dual sport for a couple reasons. The first one is weight. So compared to a shaft drive, the chain drive tends to be a little bit lighter, and it has less parasitic loss than a shaft drive. So for every horsepower that the mighty DR650 makes, somewhere around 37, a higher percentage of that horsepower finds its way to the rear wheel, as opposed to a shaft drive of equal horsepower. Now, the other option is a belt drive. And the belt drive is very similar to the chain drive and has some advantages. It tends to be lighter because you're replacing that heavy chain with a lighter weight Kevlar belt in most cases. But there are a couple disadvantages to both the shaft and the belt drive. The number one being is gear selection or changing the gear ratio of your final drive. A shaft drive, for the most part, is set from the factory, and it's somewhat difficult for a home mechanic to change that final drive ratio. On a belt drive system, there is the potential to do that, very similar to a chain and sprocket drive system. However, in most cases, it's a little less optimized than a chain and sprocket. There just is not as many manufacturers making pulleys and belt sizes as there are chains and sprockets. There's just more on the market. Now, as again, most dual sport riders have a chain drive. The biggest advantage for most dual sport riders is the fact that it is relatively easy to change your gear ratio. But why would you want to do that? Well, the reason's pretty obvious, I think, and it's certainly a simple one. Even though Suzuki created the DR650 as maybe the world's best all-around dual sport, it does good on the road, it does good on the trail, doesn't really do anything really well. The fact that they sort of geared it the way they did gives you a good compromise between use on the highway and use on some general trails. But the reality is, if you spend more time on the highway, or you maybe spend more time on trails, or some people even take these out on motocross tracks, the stock gearing just isn't going to match as well as it could. You need to optimize your gearing for the style of riding and the locations you're riding in. And that goes the same for any dual sport motorcycle. With that in mind, I reached out to Bush Pig Performance in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, to have them send me a new driveline, completely new driveline for my DR650. Mine's been on there for a while, and when you just introduce a single component such as a new chain or maybe a new sprocket like I want to do, if there's a lot of wear and the chain is stretched, sometimes they don't mesh the best. So for today's video, I am just going to install the new 15-tooth sprocket here, but in a later video, we are going to follow up with a new chain and a new rear sprocket. And all of these components are manufactured from a company called Primary Drive. They're made in Taiwan. They are all steel. They're not aluminum. And they appear to be very well built. And Bush Pig Performance tells me that they get good reviews on these and are confident they're going to provide me with long, reliable service on the DR650. But of course, only time will tell. Now, they did send these to me, or I should say, I ordered them from them in the factory 525 gauge chain. The DR650 uses this chain, which is a little bit heavier than what comes on the DRZ 400. It uses the 520 gauge chain. And many DR650 owners modify their driveline to accept the 520 chain. It's a little bit lighter. There is also far more gearing selections in that 520 chain versus the 525 that I have here. However, in my application where I'm just going back to the factory gearing, I just stuck with the 525 chain. It's a little heavier. I'm hoping that robustness will lead to longer service life for me, and that's what I'm going to put on there. Also, a lot of DR owners will carry an extra sprocket with them, sometimes two if they're on a longer trip. So if they're maybe going across Canada and they know there is going to be several days where they're going to be riding some more technical off-road sections, they'll take the time to stop and change from the 15-tooth down to the 14-tooth, and that allows them that extra torque and maneuverability in slower, more technical trails. For me, I'm going to put this on and ride it, and we're going to see how it works. Before we do that, though, let's install the tack on the bike and take the bike for a ride. Karl's waiting today. He is hoping to go for a ride with me, and we'll see how we do, say around, like I say, maybe 80 kilometers an hour. Let's take a look at what the RPM is on the engine. So let's get that tach on now. It is an absolutely stunning but chilly day here today where I'm riding with Karl. Today's goal again is to get a baseline, so I'm going to focus on 80 kilometers an hour. You're going to see it right here is where 80k is, and you're going to see that 3,780 RPM is our RPM that we're going to target. So we're going to use that as our baseline, and for now, let's just carry on riding. Here's Karl. What's that bike? That's not a DR? Beast. A beast. Well, we going the whole way through here? Alright, after you. Karl bought a V-Strom. Not a bad day for a ride. What is it, about 9 degrees, 10 degrees now? 11. So Karl, tell everybody about what you got.
That's a Suzuki 650 V-Strom.
Nice. What year's that?
2019, I think.
Yeah, eh?
Yeah, I think it's 2019.
It's nice. So Karl bought that this year in the spring. He's been all over the place. He's been out east on it all over, eh? As I've been slaving and working.
Oh yes, I've been trying to fill my day.
So if you would like a little more information about Karl's bike, let me know. We'll do a whole video on it and why he switched from a DR650 to the DL650, right? Is that what those are?
Yeah, DL, yep.
Yeah, and if you want to see content on that V-Strom, we'll add it to the channel. So winter's here, it's time for all kinds of upgrades. Karl wants to put a 2000cc engine in it and all that, right? Oh, no, just kidding. Yeah. But let me know, and we'll include some information on that bike as well. Maybe some service information, things like that for those that might be interested in it. It's a beautiful bike, Karl.
Yeah, handled the trail pretty good.
Handled the trail, man.
I didn't bottom out or anything.
No, it's really, really good. I like it.
Take it easy.
Well, honestly, it sort of suits the riding style that we have, right?
Yeah,
you're a little more civilized than the DR.
I'm not racing, so I don't need to fall off.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you do drop it, it's good to have a friend with you.
Friends are good for bigger bikes. Yeah. So even this one here, you've had to help me a couple times to get this one up.
Well, it's got crash bars on it and stuff. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's enjoy this day. We'll catch up soon. Well, everybody, that was a fun ride. It's good to get out with my buddy Karl, and I hope you liked the sneak peek at his new motorcycle. That 650 V-Strom is pretty sweet. I really liked it. It's smooth, it's fast, got a lot of power, and I can see why he upgraded, but I still like the simplicity of my DR650, so why don't we get going on getting that front sprocket changed out now? You may be asking yourself, if I have this up on a stand, why did I lower it back to the ground? And the reason for that is we have to break free some nuts that hold the sprocket in place, and also we have to break free the nut on the end of the adjustment bolt for the rear tire in order to put some slack into the chain and get this front sprocket off. So to do that, the easiest way is to put the bike back on the ground, put it in gear, and use the weight of the motorcycle and the transmission to hold those components in place while you break the bolts free. Now, if you wanted to do it on the stand, you could absolutely have someone step on the rear foot brake while you break those parts free, or you could use something like a weight to hang off of the foot brake pedal to give you the same effect. But right now, I'm just gonna put it back down onto the ground, break those few fasteners free, and then I'm going to put it back up onto the stand so I can get better angles with the camera. Let's do that right now. This cover plate is plastic, and it's held in place with 3 fasteners. One here, and one here. Now mine only has 2 because this lower one near the shift linkage had been snapped off at some point. So I only have this one and this one to contend with. We'll pull this out and have a look at what's underneath it. So when it comes time to retighten this and these bolts, make sure to just use a nut driver or a small 1/4" drive socket set, and you don't have to reef on these to tighten them up. You'll end up cracking that and it'll be replacement time or upgrade time. Once the cover plate's off, you can see these 3 bolts that retain your drive sprocket. These have a 10mm head, and they're only held in place with around 11 foot-pounds of torque, I think it is. I'll look that up. But also this retaining ring that captures the spline shaft, the output shaft here. I'm going to break these free while the bike's on the ground, and to do that, I'm just going to use a 3mm socket and hopefully give these guys a little bit of a break like that. There we go. And you can see the weight of the bike and the transmission is enough to hold that in place. Now I'm going to break the rear drive shaft free so I can slide the tire, and then I'm going to put it back up on a jack stand just so I can get a little bit better angle on this for you. The DR650 uses one of 2 styles of nuts to retain the rear axle. Mine uses a self-locking nut, but there is also a castle nut that uses a cotter pin to hold that in place and prevent it from backing off. Mine uses a 24mm socket. I'm going to attach it to a 1/2" drive wrench here. And again, with the bike in gear, I'm just going to break that free, and I'm going to hold the spokes here as well just to give me a little more leverage. I'm just going to back that off so that when I get this up on the stand, I can twist these snail cams here back to the 0 setting and give me some slack in the chain. I am going to take note of where the snail cam is now. It's just a little bit before the number 4 on both sides. I'm expecting with an extra tooth, I'm going to be up near 4 or maybe a little bit closer to 4.5 when I go to tension the chain. But for now, this will give me the slack that I need to get that front chain ring off. With the bike back up on the stand, we can now remove the 3 retaining bolts here. They are held in with blue Loctite, so you may need to use a nut driver to fully take these out. I'm just going to take this one out because I've already had it out. And you'll see the remnants of the blue Loctite on there. It's a white encrusted material. You definitely don't want to use red on here. Red is permanent, which means in order to get it out, you would have to heat the bolt up, which you don't really want to do because you have seals back in behind there. So these come out, and you will notice that these are a shouldered bolt. They're a special bolt. I don't know if it needs to be that, but that's the way they are. The next piece that needs to come off is this retaining ring here. And the way this comes off is it slides counterclockwise and lines up with the splines. and then it just sort of pulls off here. I'll see if I can get it to go. There we go. So you end up with this. Normally, there is a dampening ring, a rubber dampening ring that runs around in this groove. My bike doesn't have it because I have a 14-tooth sprocket. The dampening ring doesn't fit there. I have heard of people putting a little bit of silicone on the backside here to help dampen any chatter on the front sprocket when they reassemble it. I've never personally had a problem with just leaving it off, so I'm not going to reinstall it. But these rings are available if you happen to lose it and you want to put one on, or you could again try the silicone trick, which I have seen. With all the bolts and the retaining ring out, now we can just reach in and slide this off. And the manual does tell you to bring it all off as one piece, not to try and get the chain off of the sprocket first. Once you get it to this point, you can just take your sprocket out and it's free and ready to go. If we flip it around, you'll see that this also is shouldered here. It has a raised portion that has to face in towards your engine when you reassemble with the new sprocket. For now, I'm just going to take this and put it on the bench. With the 14 tooth cleaned up a little bit, you can see it is a 14, and it overall is not in terribly bad shape. The teeth aren't super pointy, nothing's worn out, there's no shark tooth hooking in here or anything like that. And I mean, I don't really ride the bike super aggressively. I keep the chain well oiled, and I think the past owner did as well. So there may not be a ton of miles on this either. But you can see, compared to the 15 tooth here, there is a size difference. You can definitely see it. I'll be interested to see the changes here. You can kind of get an idea here as well, if I line these up, just how much larger in diameter one tooth makes. It should improve. Things I've read said, I might see, 4 or 5 mile an hour difference at the same RPM, which would help reduce RPM while I'm riding. So let's get this onto the bike. It's a reverse order, and tighten it up, and then we'll take it out for a ride and see how it goes. With the sprocket off and I pulled the chain out of the way here, I can now inspect for any damage to the splines, any massive weepage from my seals, which I don't see, and I can also see the seal retainer that I bought and upgraded my bike with. Mine is a 2009 and it did not come from the factory with this seal retainer. The good news is you can go and buy this, and I'll find the part number and put it up on the screen here, and you can install this. It's cheap, I think. I think it was under $20 for this part. It bolts in, and now's a great time to do it while you have your sprocket off. So it's something that I would certainly do if your bike doesn't have it. It's a little bit of preventative safety, and it just gives you peace of mind. First thing we're going to do is pull our chain back through and insert this into the chain. There. I just had to move the wheel forward again to get enough space to get that lined up. Next, we are going to put our retainer plate back on. I've cleaned it up a little bit. And again, some people don't use that dampener ring, but now is the time you would put that dampener ring on. If you have a DR and you've changed your sprocket, let me know if you always put the dampener ring on or if you have another solution to help stop chatter. All right, so I'm going to line this up and turn it. Just got to find the groove here. Come on. There we go. See how it lines up there? I hope that shows up on camera. Next, I'll take a little dab of blue Loctite here and put each one of these fasteners back in with my fingers. Things to remember when you're doing this is that shoulder has to face in. I forgot to show that, but it has to face in to get the right spacing on the bike. And I'm just going to wind these down with the nut driver here. Then I'm going to tension the chain lower it to the ground and tighten everything up. So in the midpoint of the swing arm here, so this is the midpoint between the axle center and the drive sprocket center, I am going to measure, and what I'm going to do is I am going to take and push up on the chain, and I am at around 20, I'm going to say 26 millimeters off the bottom of that swing arm, and I'm going to come down, so there's 36, 46, 56. So that's 30 and a little bit more, so around 35 millimeters of free play between up and down on this. It seems like a lot, but the manual specifies that's what you need so that when the suspension compresses, it doesn't put undue stress on your chain and ultimately on your sprocket up front, which is your output shaft. It'll pull the output shaft and put pressure on the bearings. So it seems like a lot of free play there, but I've been setting it like this for years without any problems. So I'm going to put that cover on, and then I think we can take the bike out for a ride. So the last thing that we need to do before we put our cover plate on is to torque down those bolts there. Now they get torqued at 53 inch-pounds or 6 Newton meters, and with my torque wrench it's much easier just to set it for 6 Newton meters. 6 Newton meters is really weird on the inch-pound scales on this. When you're torquing this, you can sneak up on them in a star pattern, or you can just go all the way around. I'm just going to go all the way around here, but make sure to do this. In fact, I had the cover plate on here and forgot that I hadn't torqued this. It happens to all of us. So it's never a bad idea to review the manual again and make sure that you have done all the steps on reassembly here. I'm going to get to work and torque these down. As soon as I got the bike out on the road, I noticed a couple things. One is first gear feels a little bit taller and it's actually a little easier to get around town. It does definitely feel like the gearing is taller. Overall, it's less buzzy. And I really noticed this when I got it out onto the open road and got it up to around 80 kilometers an hour right here. You can see we're at 79 kilometers an hour. It's really hard with the glare to get this to show up at 3,480 RPM. So that's 300 RPM less than the same exact area that I was riding in with the 14 tooth. And you can notice it. It feels like there's an extra gear here for me to utilize. I really like it. And I do think you can see the difference. Now, let's take it out and get it out on a 100 kilometer an hour road. Now in the past ride, I didn't actually get it on the highway. It was a little bit too cold, but today is about 15, so I took it out on the highway. And I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I'm riding 118 kilometers an hour here. I never rode this bike this fast on the highway. I would normally be around here, 97 to 105, where I'm spinning around 4,200 RPM, which means I was probably somewhere around 45 to 4,600 RPM normally in the past. So if I run this up a little bit here, maybe to 110, 100, you know, whatever, 110, I think that's maybe where I was sitting in the past. And the bike feels much more composed now. It handles these higher speeds, like 116, 115 here, without too much problems. It feels really good. And in fact, I eventually ran it up to 130 kilometers an hour at 5,600 RPM. I've never rode the bike that fast up until now. Well, that was very, very interesting. I learned quite a bit about the difference between this 14-tooth sprocket that I originally had on my motorcycle and the 15-tooth standard gearing that's on there now. For the style of riding that I do, that is primarily more like an adventure bike than a dual sport off-road enduro bike, the factory gearing really does make a lot more sense to the style of riding that I do. Now again, if you tend to ride more single track, or maybe more aggressive trails, well, the 14 tooth might be what you want. It definitely does have a little more torque down on the bottom end. And where I really noticed that was starting off from a stop sign is the taller first gear here made riding around in the city a little easier. I didn't seem to have to be working the toe shifter quite as often as when I had the 14 tooth. And out on the highway where I'm seeing 80 to 110 km/h speed, so that's around 50 to 65 miles an hour, the 15 tooth factory gearing really does make the bike feel a little bit more composed, less buzzy than what it did with the 14 tooth. It's quite surprising actually what one tooth on the front can do to change the road manners of a motorcycle. So today that's all I have. I am going to change out the rear sprocket on this and the chain in a future video, but for today, that's the video. It's like typically long-winded Dino's Tinker Shed type video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, like, subscribe, and share the video with your friends and the people you ride with if you find it a valuable content. Until then, I hope that you get to get out riding, that you're riding safe, and that everybody's good with your family. And until I see you again, tinker easy. Bye for now. I gotta get this girl washed now. See you soon.